The Asus ROG Strix Scar 16. That's a mouthful. I had to read it a couple times to get that right. Is my favorite gaming laptop of 2023. And in this video, I'll tell you what I like about it and what makes it my favorite, and also what are my least favorite things about it. So the particular model of the Strix Scar 16 I have here has the Mobile 4090, the Intel 13980HX, 32 gigabytes of RAM, and it has the Nebula HDR 1600p 240Hz display. So it's basically the top end model that you can get. But I imagine if you have one with the 4080, it'll probably perform very similarly. I think there's only a 5 to 10% difference in performance between the 4090 and the 4080 mobile versions. I really enjoy the appearance of this laptop. If you want it to be stealth, you want it to be low profile, you can turn off all the lights, and the design of the laptop doesn't look too gamery or loud. It blends in perfectly fine. It has a dark finish. There's nothing that like sticks out. The logo, the Asus logo, the owl eye, I think it is, doesn't look kind of strange. Whereas even if you have like a Razer laptop and you turn off all the LEDs, you still got like a green, triple-headed snake thing. So it's kind of weird to bring that into like a work meeting or even like working in the airport. Kind of gives off a certain vibe. You might not care, but it's what it is. But here, if you want to, you're alone or you're playing games, you can turn on the RGB. It looks like crazy, like rainbow lights, and it's awesome. Or if you don't, you can just turn it all off and it just looks like one of those thick workstation replacement laptops people use for CAD tools, and no one would be none the wiser. The speakers on the Scar 16, the Strix Scar 16, are actually pretty good. I only bring it up because most gaming laptop speakers aren't great. But if the MacBook Pro, 16 was 10 out of 10, I give this a solid 9 out of 10. So here's a quick clip of what it sounds like. My microphone is right above the laptop, and this is 100% volume. So I wouldn't be disappointed at all bringing this to like a hotel room or wherever I'm traveling and just watching a movie from it, or listening to music directly from the laptop itself and using the built-in speakers. No need for headphones or anything. Is perfectly acceptable. I think Asus did a really good job with the speakers. One slight issue with the Strix Scar 16, at least with the versions with the mini LED screen, is that there is some what I would call flashlighting. Flashlighting is a term that describes bleed from a bright object in a black background. This affects any full array LED type screen. It used to be much more prevalent in older TVs that only had like 100 or like 50 zones. It's basically where you see light bleed out from the spot in the black background. I'll show you a test right now. As you can see, as you're following the dot, there's a little bit of bloom around the dot, and this is only in HDR mode, because in HDR mode the brightness is a lot higher, so the bleed gets a lot higher. In SDR mode, even with multi-zone control of the LEDs, I don't see anything, or it's not noticeable at all. But if you're running the desktop in HDR mode, which actually I don't recommend unless you need the brightness for outdoors, you will notice some bleed if you're doing like dark mode themes, like if you go on Reddit and it's dark mode, or if you're doing coding, and your cursor will probably bleed a little bit on the screen if your background is entirely dark. So beyond the slight bleeding or flashlighting in the HDR mode, in a dark screen, the control of the mini LEDs, besides that, this to me is basically the most ideal and perfect laptop gaming screen. And that's because, one, it's 1600p. So 2560 by 1600, you get that nice 16 by 10 aspect ratio. So when you're browsing the web, you got that extra vertical space. If you're doing work, it's really more useful than having 16:9 since you can more easily scroll through text or whatever document that you have. Also, 1600p is ideal for gaming performance because a lot of laptops they might have 4K like the Razer 16. And 4K, you can't really tell the difference between 4K and 1600p on a 16-inch screen. So you're pumping a lot more pixels out, but it's not really making a visual difference to you. And it will worsen performance over time, especially as the laptop ages and graphics requirements for games gets higher. So this one, because of the 600p, will give you the ideal balance between desktop usage with high PPI and also gaming performance. Now it also has a very high refresh rate display, 240 Hz at 1600p. So whatever response time you're gonna have in a game will be great because the screen refreshes so quickly. So I play a lot of Street Fighter and I can't stand any latency because that'll easily lead to defeats, especially online, since there's already latency there. So that's very important to me. And of course, in FPS, that matters too. And since this laptop generally has like a 4080 or 4090, you may very well be able to get close to 240 Hz on, low graphics competitive games. Now, another thing, this laptop gets super bright, so bright, like 1,000 nits around there per the spec. I don't have a way to measure it, but I can tell you if you're in a dark room and it's an all white screen, it's blaringly bright. It's like looking into the sun almost, or a flashlight. Also, unlike the Razer, the natural color of this screen, even though it's DCI P3 100%, it's not overly vivid. I feel like on the Razer screen they overly tuned it and it looks like a vivid profile on like a 90s TV sometimes. Whereas this one is completely natural. Asus did a good job calibrating the display, making the colors look natural in both SDR and HDR mode. The gaming performance of this laptop with the 4090, of course, is as good as you're gonna get with a gaming laptop. This has the 150 watt plus 25 watt boost TGP for the 4090. So it's the most power you're gonna push to the 4090. It mostly runs at 150 watts and sometimes boosts a little bit higher than that, I've noticed during games. In comparison to the performance on my Razer Blade 16 with the same 4090, it's pretty much the same. So in Cyberpunk, running the benchmark at the exact same settings, lowering the screen resolution on the Razer to match the Scar, they get about 102 FPS. The Asus is a little bit less, but I think that's just margin of error. So it performs nominally. Main folly with most gaming laptops is the battery life isn't great. And this laptop's battery life isn't that great, but I feel like it's acceptable for a quote-unquote gaming laptop. So I did a very simple test. I watched a YouTube video, 1080p, full screen, 50% brightness on the screen, 50% volume on the speakers, not using HDR, running 60 Hz refresh rate. So kind of the typical mobile settings you would have when using a laptop not for gaming. And I got about 2 minutes per 1% of battery. So if you had 100% battery, you get about 200 minutes of runtime, which is a little bit over 3 hours. It's 3 hours, 20 minutes. I would hold back maybe 10%. So you're closer to just 3 hours. And I think that's completely reasonable. Most of the time you're gonna have this laptop plugged in. It's so big, the brick is so big. You're not really, if you're thinking of getting this to lug it around from room to room, office to office, cafe to cafe, then I don't know what to say. It's not ideal for that. So I have a gaming laptop because sometimes I have to travel for work weeks at a time, and I don't want to lug like a desktop with me. I want to be able to game in my hotel room and maybe the airport, mostly in my hotel room. One thing I've noticed with bringing this laptop in particular is that the power brick with it is huge. So here's a comparison of the power brick size versus the power brick that comes with the Razer 16, which is a very similarly spec laptop, has similar power needs. You can tell it's much thicker, it's taller, it's also wider, but it's only slightly heavier. But the space is the main issue. It takes up more space. I can't really put it in my backpack. I put it in my suitcase along with the laptop itself because the laptop itself is also pretty chunky. I think Asus needs to go to the GaN chargers to reduce the size of the brick, since I think most people are using this to travel, at least to some extent. Otherwise, why would they get a laptop? So going on the theme with size, this laptop, even though it's a 16-inch laptop, it's not a regularly sized 16-inch laptop. It's much thicker. It kind of juts out more. So if you have things like a 16-inch laptop sleeve, a 16-inch laptop size backpack where it has like a section for a 16-inch laptop, it probably won't fit this. You won't be able to close the sleeve, or you won't be able to close the backpack because it's simply just too thick, or it'll rub against the corner of the laptop, making you think it's probably going to scratch it. So that's something just to keep in mind. It is a bigger than normal 16-inch laptop, and that makes it less portable. My last mild concern with this laptop is that the fan noise is loud, but all gaming laptops, the fan noise is loud, especially, you're playing the game with the thing plugged in, it's at full power. It's going to be loud, but the problem with specifically this one is that the fan noise at 100% or close to 100% has kind of a pitch to it, like a whine. Let me play it for you right now. Here's how the fans sound on turbo mode in the Armory Crate app, running at full load in the game. So as you can hear, there's a very slight kind of whine to the fan sound, but it's not terrible by any means. So if that's something that bothers you, it's something to consider. But I don't think you're going to get a huge amount of improvement from other gaming laptops. So on the flip side, even though the fan is somewhat loud like most gaming laptops, the cooling is very good on this laptop in terms of GPU and CPU temperatures. The GPU temperature under load remains easily under 80 degrees C in an ambient room temperature of about 70 degrees. So even when I'm pushing like 4K in a game connected to an external monitor, I don't see temperatures rise above maybe 78, playing for several hours, letting it sit there. For the CPU, under synthetic benchmarks like Cinebench, I get around 95 degrees, so that's how much it'll boost to 95 degrees, so it'll push the processor as hard as it can, and it'll stay at 95 degrees and it will not throttle. So at that 95 degrees Celsius, you'll get the full boost clocks of the specs of the 13980HX. So that's 4 gigahertz on the efficiency cores and 5.6 gigahertz on the performance cores, and it never throttles under that, even though that's a very heavy synthetic benchmark. Another aspect of the cooling, besides keeping the GPU and the CPU cool, is keeping you cool. So in my other video of my Razer Blade 16, something about aluminum laptops is that the heat conducts from the components into the chassis. So you'll feel the heat in the palm rest, and you'll feel the heat in the keyboard and even in the touchpad. The Scar 16 does a really good job of pushing out the heat to the sides and to the back of the laptop. That extension on the back of the laptop moves the heat pipes very far away from you, so you don't feel any of that on the chassis where you rest your palm or you put your fingers. As I showed in that other video, it stays about 85 to 82 degrees while gaming on the palm rest area and the keyboard area. So in a room that's ambient about 70 degrees Fahrenheit, that's not too much more. It only rises from idle to about 85. There's only about maybe a 10 degrees difference. So you won't have any sweaty palms or uncomfortableness resting and playing for long periods of time, unlike an aluminum body laptop. So on that note, you might think, oh, it's a mostly plastic body with an aluminum lid. It's going to feel flimsy and not feel like a very high quality, high-end device. And I think that's actually wrong. The plastic quality on the Strix Scar 16 feels plastic fantastic, I think, as another reviewer mentioned. It feels solid. There's no flex really at all. It feels very durable. It's not like a cheap, Dell that costs, $400 that you get on Black Friday. This feels like high-end plastic that you would get in like a PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5 controller, something like that. Or what really it looks like is like the acrylic color, like N64s, has that kind of feel to it. It's, to me, feels high quality, even though it's plastic. And the lid is actually metal, so that helps too. Is when you pick it up, you touch that lid and it feels pretty solid. The ergonomics of this laptop for gaming use are very good. In a other video on my Razer Blade 16, something I mentioned is that the key travel distance on the Razer is very shallow. It's about 1 millimeter. In that comparison, I also measured the key travel distance on the Strix Scar 16, and it's almost 2 millimeters, 1.8 millimeters. The keys are a little bit loose, so it's hard to get a super precise measurement, but that key throw makes it a lot better for gaming. You don't accidentally activate the keys. You don't have to curl your fingers up to avoid touching the other buttons, and it more tactilely feels good. The trackpad is also good. It's, glass is very smooth. The drivers for it, the Precision Asus drivers, work very well. I have no issues using the trackpad. I don't have any palm rejection issues. It's almost as good as a MacBook, except not egregiously large. So overall, I don't see any major weaknesses with this laptop. The speakers are good, the ergonomics are good, the cooling is good, the performance is good, the screen is, perfect. The only thing that might not persuade you to get it is the size. As you see, it's not exactly the most portable gaming laptop. The Razer and some others are like the M16 version of the Asus laptop are smaller, and they sometimes sacrifice some things because of that, but they are more portable. But I think since they're not that portable, having this one works better because it's just has less cons than those otherwise. So those are my likes and dislikes of my favorite gaming laptop of 2023, the Asus ROG Strix Scar 16. If you found that information useful or entertaining in any way, please like and subscribe and support the channel. I love to make more videos. I'm a test engineer by trade, and I'd love to actually use it to do something fun with the hardware toys that come out every year by all the different companies and share that experience with you guys.